Well, finally got my dishes done and everything. Got my chores done. I'm in for the night now. Got my blanket up on my door over there. See? Um, this is the end of day 15 with the propane tank, with the bottomless propane tank. Anyway, oh, anyway, I was thinking of something today, and it has to do with the proposed CBDC. That central bank digital currency. That they basically, what's happening is governments all over the world are trying to make cash obsolete. They're trying to crash their economies and so on. They want to have one world economy, and they want to have this central bank digital currency as the currency of the world, basically, and we all have to use it. And of course, it'll be very controlled. I mean, they'll be able to turn it off. They'll be able to reduce it. They'll be able to reduce your buying power. If you're on the outs with them and you have $100 in CBDC, or the equivalent of that, they can turn around and say your $100 is now going to have $50 of buying power instead of 100. Your neighbor who's been good and been obedient and hasn't complained and hasn't been critical of us or anything, he and who went and got all the shots we told him to get, and he wears his mask and so on. His $100 is still going to be $100, but your $100 is now worth $50. They'll be able to do that. They'll be able to restrict what you buy. They'll be able to say, we don't think you need certain things. Or we only think you need a certain amount. We're going to control how much of a thing you can buy. So, for example, we're going to control how much meat you can buy. And once you've had your monthly allotment of meat, you're not going to be able to buy any more meat. Because if you try to, it's going to come up at the checkout stand that it's an unlawful purchase at that point because you've had your meat ration for the month. This is the sort of thing they're going to do. They're already doing this in China. But what I was thinking about is an historical thing. And there really is nothing new under the sun. What I'm thinking of and what I'm going to compare the CBDC, central bank digital currency, to is coal miners' script. Now, I don't know how many of you know history that are listening to this. Some of you may not be very patient with me because I'm going to tell you some history and you may already know it. Probably a lot of you do already know this history, but for the benefit of those who don't, I'm going to explain how script worked. Basically, if you were a coal miner 100 years ago in a place like West Virginia, for example, you get paid. You get paid for your work like anybody does. But the coal mines didn't pay cash. They didn't pay legal tender like if you were in West Virginia, for example, they didn't pay you in U.S. dollars. What they paid you in was what was called script. And script was money that was issued by the coal mine, by the company that owned the coal mine. And that money was only good in the company-owned store. You see, the coal mine owned a general store. And you could get anything you needed in that general store. It didn't matter what you needed. If you needed food, you could get it. Any kind of food you might need or want. Hardware, furniture, clothing, office supplies, school supplies, parts for machinery. Anything at all you could possibly need, you could buy at the company store. But it would all cost you a lot more than any other business would sell the same item for. And see, by doing that, they made you a slave to the company. You'd also live in company housing. The company would own the town surrounding the mine, and they would rent you your house. And what would happen is they'd deduct your rent from your wages every week, and they'd pay you the balance in script, which you had to spend at their store, and you'd have to pay much higher prices for things than you would otherwise. So it was a way of keeping you poor, keeping you dependent, and having total control over you. Now, you'd have an account at the company store. If you needed something and you couldn't afford it, they'd be more than happy, if you'd sign on the dotted line to acknowledge your indebtedness for the price of the item, which would be overpriced, and also for the interest on the loan, because they were loaning you money, basically, if they were going to let you take the item out of the store without having actually paid for it. Well, you could sign on the dotted line, you could get the thing that you needed or wanted, but then you'd be in debt. And you would have overpaid for something, plus you're paying interest on top. So now you're really screwed. And see, this is the thing. If you lost your job at the coal mine, or if you decided you were fed up and you wanted to quit, well, you couldn't really go anywhere because you were in debt. You owed the company store. It's like the old saying, the old song, there's a line in an old song that said, "I owe my soul to the company store." Well, that's what it was. It was a huge scam, really. And the coal miners, they finally organized and they worked together and they fought against it. And ultimately they won. It was an ugly fight. There were people killed, people were seriously hurt, people went to jail. It was an awful fight. But they eventually won. And they started to be paid in US dollars. And at that point, their lives got better. Things improved for them. But here's the thing. There's my Rocky. I like to look at him. He's so cute. Anyway, I'll turn this off because it hurts his eyes. But here's the thing. What they're doing to us now is they're trying to take us back to the company store days. They're trying to take us back to the days of servitude, where basically the average person is in a state of slavery. It was really a form of slavery, the way they were paying their workers back then in this company script and forcing them to spend their money at their store. Really, what it was is it was a way of keeping slaves and doing it legally. And this CBDC shares a lot of things in common with company script, with the company script that was paid to coal miners 100 years ago. It allows a small group of people to have absolute control over the rest of the people. They can dictate where and how and when you can spend your money. They can turn your money off. They can turn your money right off, which means you could be put out of your home. You could lose everything. I mean, that's an awful, to put that much power into the hands of a few people. We've seen in the past, if we look at history, it's never ended well. And ultimately, the majority of the people who are being screwed over under a system like that wind up having to rise up and rebel. And when that happens, it's terrible because there's bloodshed and there's death and there's all sorts of awful things happen. But that winds up having to happen in order to right the wrong that's being done and to make things fair, basically, to make things to bring things into line with how they should be. Personally, I prefer not to have a few decades or 100 years or something of suffering on the part of humanity, followed by a huge war where a bunch of people have to die, where the blood is just flowing in the streets, and then things get made right. So that's the reason that I can't go along with this digital currency and the digital identity and all the other stuff that goes with it, the social credit system. all the stuff that's being pushed by the authorities right now, I can't go along with any of it because I see where it's headed. And I don't want to be part of that generation that gave it all away. It gave up on all the things that our forefathers fought for. And now we're going to force a future generation to fight for those things all over again because we're too lazy and cowardly to stand up and to say, no, I won't do this. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that anyway, on what I'm seeing happening. There's a lot of talk right now that the economy is right on the verge of collapsing. When that happens, the government's going to start pushing hard for us to fall in line and to start doing all this digital currency and stuff. The thing is, though, the government itself has created the issue. Not just our government in Canada, although our government's guilty of it, but governments all over the world are doing the same thing. They're purposely crashing their economies, and they're all talking about building back better. Well, if you buy a piece of property and you want to build a house on it, but there's already a structure on the property where you want to build your house, you can't build your house on top of an existing structure. So what do? You tear that structure down. You tear that structure down, and then you have a clean slate to build your house on. Well, that's what they're doing. They're in the process now of tearing it all down, and they want to rebuild it the way they want it. And by they, I mean people like Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Justin Trudeau, Joe Biden, and other people, all kinds of them. That fella there with the glasses, I can't think of his name now, but he was one of President Nixon's top guys. There's a bunch of them anyway. If I wasn't trying to think of his name, I'd be able to, but bottom line is this, though. All those types of people, they want to tear it down and they want to rebuild it into a dystopian nightmare for us. It'd be lovely for them, but it'll be a dystopian nightmare for us, or at least a few that they allow to live, because they're talking about a 90 to 95% purge of the population. That they want to get rid of 90 to 95% of us and just keep a small remnant around to do any of the work that